oh, you're over imaginative. Well, you're just too creative. Maybe you're dreamy. If you've ever been tagged as being over creative, over imaginative as a kid or later in life, maybe you too are an intuitive undercover. See, I was dubbed an over-imaginative child when I was little. In fact, my parents at one point took me to the pediatrician because I was so imaginative. And really what was happening there is I was talking to my imaginary friends. I was telling fanciful stories about there being a lion in the backyard in a big bush that I used to go and sit with and talk to. I used to imagine unseen things. Now that I'm a professional intuitive, I get, especially working sometimes with kids, that's my psychic side awakening. That's my intuitive ability to see. And as kids, I think a lot of us have had that. A lot of us have been able to sense and feel non-bodied beings, ghosts, spirits, spirit guides, angels, elementals of the land. Because when I think back to my own experience as a kid, yeah, there was a lion in the backyard, and that lion was my friend, was my spirit friend. And was it a lion? Well, it had the energy like a lion, and it did reside in this one area where this big bush was, where I could sit and hide and talk to my lion friend. I think about these past cultures, wisdom cultures, where there were metaphors and myths and archetypes like dwarves and trolls and menehune and names for these non-bodied spirits and elemental beings that we just don't track them anymore. But does that mean they don't exist? My parents, when they took me to the pediatrician, they were like, there's something unusual about this kid. And that's probably true. I know that I remember thinking, wow, I wonder why all the kids aren't talking about all these invisible things as openly as I am. I wonder why other kids want to hang out with other kids instead of with all these spiritual feelings. But I also remember that the pediatrician was very kind, and he was some famous kind of pediatrician, Dr. Walsh, in La Jolla. And he was a pediatric psychiatrist as well as a pediatrician, as I recall. And he ran a battery of tests, not because he thought there was something wrong with me, but because he was curious about my gifts and abilities, and he gave me an IQ test, among others, and I guess it came back really high. I still don't know what the IQ test number was for me, and I don't really care because I don't really believe that's how we measure intelligence. But it was high enough that after that, my parents treated me a little differently, and they put me in a special school, like a school. It was close to our neighborhood, but not as close as my neighborhood school, and it had gifted programs. Remember the gifted and advanced programs? Even though I was just 7 years old or something. So I just wanted to share this story from the past because I'm curious. I suspect that there are more of us that are intuitively gifted and intuitively oriented, and maybe even psychically or shamanically oriented, that when you stop and realize it, you've been that way your whole life. And now that I'm working as a professional intuitive, I work with kids, at the bequest of their parents, kids that are having behavioral issues or bad dreams, or who are reporting something that seems like it's a spirit attack or something. And working directly with kids, I've come to believe that children, especially before the age of 7 or 8, they remember past lives. They can tune in very naturally with spirits and elements of the land and fairies and all these things that we've lost the metaphors and names for, that they're naturally open and intuitive. And our linear analytical culture, especially if you come from an academic background like I do, looks at that and wants to put that in a box of creativity and imagination and basically what's not real. I remember I used to watch Sesame Street all the time. Like, right? I was born in '69, so Sesame Street was like, grew up with me. And there came a point in the development of Sesame Street where Big Bird's invisible friend, or imaginary friend, Snuffleupagus, they had the conversation that basically said Snuffleupagus wasn't real. And I remember that it really bothered me, because to have a place and a world and a show where invisible friends are honored as real was validating for me as a kid. And to have it turn around, even though I know that they did that because child psychiatrists told them, you know, kids need to know the difference between what's real and what's imaginary, and there's this blurry line. I'm just like, yeah, but magical realism, guys. Anyways, it's a whole nother conversation about narrative and media, but I can just say that as a kid, my imaginary friends were real to me, and they gave me good advice. And I feel very lucky that I was raised in a spiritual tradition in the Catholic Church, and sort of a mystic Christianity version of the Catholic Church, where devotion to the highest good was paramount, because I always had that devotion to the highest good. And so I suspect that my devotion to the highest good, my genuine desire to align with love and only what's love, protected me probably and put me in touch with energies and guides that are of the highest good. And I had really good experiences with my imaginary friends, and the voices in my head were benevolent and helpful. And I wish, looking back, that we taught our kids more openly about devotion to the highest good and how to tell the difference between a creepy or manipulative spirit, in the same way that we try to teach our kids how to tell the difference between a good person and a manipulative, creepy person, to honor our kids in their knowing, in their intuitive knowing, their feelings. They get creepy feelings when they're around a creepy person mostly. And so to develop in our own kids that natural ability to discern, in the light of their devotion to the highest good, they can feel what's not of the highest good, and what an important skill that is. So I wanted to speak to this as I'm telling stories from my own life about my spiritual awakening TM. Like, I'm not crazy about all the words that we have to use for this, but if you were an imaginative, I should say, child, you're not alone. And it might be a reflection of your natural inherent alignment with a more intuitive approach. And I want to encourage you to utilize your intuitive gifts now in the real world, in your real life, in your real career, in your real business, because it's not just your imagination. It's not just your imagination. One of my favorite teachers, Beatrix Quintana, once told me, when I was opening to my intuitive gifts, and she caught me once saying, well, yeah, but I'm not sure if that's just my imagination. And she said, I never want to hear you say just my imagination ever again. I was like, oh, what do you mean? And she said, Mellissa, your imagination is the seed of your psychic sight. Your imagination is the language, it's the lens, it's the filter. And this, now I'm probably riffing because I'm not sure she said all these things, but this is what I believe, that our imagination is critical as a translator for what we know intuitively. And so don't downplay your imagination. Celebrate it. Don't judge kids for being over-imaginative. Honor them for being deeply intuitively intelligent. Don't poo-poo the imagination, because our imagination is the doorway to knowing what's beyond knowing. Thanks for tuning into this little bit of the story of my own path. I appreciate you being here. And, I help people, particularly other intellectually oriented, corporate, professional women of a certain age who are mature enough now to really discover these intuitive gifts, to stand up in them, to claim them, and to leverage them in real life for real solutions to real problems, not just to seem special or guru-like or anything, but to naturalize and normalize into our intuitive gifts. And if you're digging on that, then come join me. Come join the Wisdom Collective. Come join me in the Wisdom Mastermind if you want more attention and personalization, because I actually have a map for this and a community that would welcome you.